Well, are you ready to get into Yah's Word today? I am as well. I want to invite you to open your Bibles with me to Exodus chapter 7. We're going to begin in just a moment with verse 1. We're tracking along with the Torah portion for this week, and the Torah portion is entitled, "And I Appeared." The title of my message today is this: The Demise of the Mitsrayin Magicians. The subtitle is, "A Glimpse of the Lying Wonders of the Tribulation." So let's get right into these verses, and I believe you'll see soon why I have entitled this message in this way. Exodus chapter 7, verse 1. So Yah said to Moshe, "See, I have made you an Elohim to Pharaoh." You're going to be like an Elohim to Pharaoh. "And Aharon, your brother, is your prophet. You shall speak all that I command you, and Aharon, your brother, shall speak to Pharaoh to let the children of Israel go out of his land. But I am going to harden the heart of Pharaoh, and shall increase my signs and my wonders in the land of Mitsrayin." He's going to give Pharaoh over to his hardness, and he's going to increase his signs and wonders in the land of Mitsrayin. He wants his people, and he wants the Mitsrites to know he is Elohim. Verse 4, "And Pharaoh is not going to listen to you, and I shall lay my hand on Mitsrayim and bring my divisions and my people, the children of Israel, out of the land of Mitsrayim by great judgments. And the Mitzrites shall know that I am Yah when I stretch out my hand on Mitsrayim. And I shall bring the children of Israel out from among them." And Moshe and Aharon did as Yah commanded them, so they did. So this is what Elohim tells Moshe and Aharon to do when Pharaoh demands a miracle at their hand. Verse 8. "And Yah spoke to Moshe and to Aharon, saying, when Pharaoh speaks to you, saying, show a miracle for yourselves." In other words, prove that what you're saying is true by performing a miracle. "Then you shall say to Aharon, take your rod and throw it before Pharaoh." Throw your rod down before Pharaoh and let it become a serpent. It's going to become a serpent. So Moshe and Aharon went in to Pharaoh, and they did so as Yah commanded. And Aharon threw his rod before Pharaoh and before his servants, and it became a serpent. But Pharaoh also called the wise men and the practicers of witchcraft. All right, so he's going to call in the wise men and those who practice witchcraft, the sorcerers, the magicians, to see if they can do the same type of thing. It says, "And they, the magicians of Mitsrayim, also did so with their magic." So with their magic, they were able to duplicate this wonder of casting down their rod and it becoming a serpent. "And they, each one, threw down his rod, and they became serpents. But the rod of Aharon swallowed up their rods." Keep that in mind. It may appear that the devil is mighty, but Elohim is the Almighty. Verse 13, "And Pharaoh's heart was strengthened, and he did not listen to them, as Yah had said, because the magicians, the sorcerers, were able to do a similar wonder." They used their magic, and they did the same type of thing. Then Pharaoh said, "I don't believe it. I don't believe you. My magicians could do the same thing." But go with me over to Deuteronomy chapter 18, and we'll pick up with verse 10. And this is a Torah commandment that the children of Israel were not to participate in magic or dealing with omens or to be a sorcerer and the like. Verse 10, "Let no one be found among you who makes his son or his daughter pass through the fire." In other words, to offer your newborn on the altar to Moloch by burning the child to death, or one who practices divination, or a user of magic, don't do these things, or one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or one who conjures spells, or a medium, or a spiritist, or one who calls up the dead. For whoever does these is an abomination to Yah. And because of these abominations, Yah, your Elohim, drives them out from before you. It's because of these abominations that the people of the land of Canaan were driven out before you. So don't do the same thing. Be perfect before Yah, your Elohim, for these nations whom you are possessing do listen to those using magic and to diviners. But as for you, Yah, your Elohim, has not appointed such for you. So don't do these things, and don't listen to people who do these things. So we see this battle between the righteous divine and the miracles of the true against the miracles and the magic of the darkness. So I wanted to lay a foundation as we continue with this and tell you that these events that we're reading about in the Torah point to events that will take place during the tribulation period. We see that Pharaoh is a type of Hasatan, the adversary, the enemy. We read about that in Ephesians chapter 2, beginning with verse 1. And you were dead in trespasses and sins, in which you once walked according to the course of this world, according to the ruler of the authority of the air. So Hasatan, or the devil, is the ruler of the authority of the air. It says, of the spirit that is now working in the sons of disobedience. So the spirit of Hasatan is at work in the sons of those who disobey the truth. And so we see that Pharaoh is a sovereign, he's a ruler, and we see that Hasatan is the ruler of the authority of the air. So Pharaoh pictures Hasatan. Keep that in mind as we continue to read. And then the slave masters picture demon forces which hold humanity captive. So these slave masters who inflicted the children of Israel with harshness and hard labor, they picture demon forces. We read about that in Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 12. Because we do not wrestle against flesh and blood. Our warfare is not against people, but against principalities, against authorities, against the world rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual matters of wickedness in the heavenly. So when we read about the taskmasters, keep in mind of the demon forces that are at work in this world, bringing people into captivity, into slavery to sin. And then the slavery of Egypt pictures the slavery of the human race to sin and the sinful lifestyle. We read about that in Romans chapter 6, beginning with verse 16. Do you not know that to whom you present yourselves servants or slaves for obedience, you are servants of the one whom you obey, whether of sin to death or of obedience to righteousness? You're going to be a slave to one or the other. You're either going to be a slave to sin, which leads to death, or you're going to be a slave of obedience and righteousness. Verse 17, but thanks to Elohim that you were servants of sin, yet you obeyed from the heart that form of teaching to which you were entrusted. You were a slave to sin, but you obeyed that form of teaching to which you were entrusted. And having been set free, hallelujah, from sin, you became servants or slaves of righteousness. So through belief in Yeshua and by receiving the promise of the Father, the promise of the indwelling set-apart Spirit of Yah, Yah has placed His Torah in our minds and written it upon our hearts. We've been set free from the transgression of the Torah, which is sin, and now we are servants of righteousness. And then the magicians of Mitsrayin represent the anti-Messiah and the false prophet. Let's look at 2 Timothy chapter 3, beginning with verse 1. It says, "But know this, that in the last days hard times shall come." We're already experiencing perilous times, hard times. "For men shall be lovers of self, lovers of silver," that's money, "boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, thankless, wrongdoers, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, fierce, haters of good, betrayers, reckless, puffed up, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of Elohim, having a form of reverence." They look all religious, "but denying its power." There's no power in it. "And turn away from these. For among them are those who creep into households and captivate silly or gullible women, loaded down with sins, led away by various lusts, always learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth." There's people in religion, they're always having some kind of study, they're always having some kind of fellowship or get together. And it seems like they're always talking about a study, but they're never able to come to the knowledge of the truth because they love their traditions, they love the interaction and the fellowship even more than the truth. They want to have their gathering, they want to see their friends. They do it all in the name of some sort of study, but they never come to the knowledge of the truth. You have to love the truth to come to the knowledge of the truth. "And as Yohani and Mamre opposed Moshe." Now, many believe that Yohani and Mamre were the head magicians of the land of Mitsrayin. It says, "And as Yohani and Mamre opposed Moshe," and this is a warfare between the forces of light and the forces of darkness, "so do these also oppose the truth. Men of corrupt minds, found worthless concerning the belief." There are people within the context of religion who are of corrupt minds, and they are worthless concerning the belief. Verse 9, "But they shall not go on further, for their folly shall be obvious to all, as also that of those men became." All right, not at first, because they were tracking step by step with Moshe and Aharon in the beginning, but they came to the end of their ability. Their magical powers had a limit, and their folly became obvious to all. And then Moshe and Aharon represent Yeshua and Yochanan the Immerser in the first coming of Messiah. And yet there are two witnesses that are going to appear upon the scene during the time of the tribulation. And so Moshe and Aharon point to these two witnesses who arrive on the scene just before the second coming of Messiah. And we're going to read about that here in just a moment. And so go with me to Exodus chapter 7. We're going to pick up with verse 15. And this tells us that the magicians of Mitsrayin also performed the second wonder of turning water into blood. It says, "Go to Pharaoh in the morning as he goes out to the water, and you shall stand by the river's bank to meet him, and take in your hand the rod which was turned into a serpent. And you shall say to him, Yah, the Elohim of the Hebrews, has sent me to you, saying, let my people go, so that they serve me in the wilderness. But see, until now you have not listened. Verse 17, thus said Yah, by this you know that I am Yah. See, I am striking the waters which are in the river with the rod that is in my hand, and they shall be turned to blood. And the fish in the river shall die, and the river shall stink, and the Mitsrites shall find it impossible to drink the water of the river. And Yah spoke to Moshe, say to Aharon, take your rod and stretch out your hand over the waters of Mitsrayin, over the Nile River and all the waters of Mitsrayin, over their streams, over their rivers, over their ponds, and over all their pools of water, that they become blood. A wonderful, powerful miracle. And there shall be blood in all the land of Mitsrayin, both in wooden and in stone containers. And Moshe and Aharon did so as Yah commanded, and he lifted up the rod and struck the waters that were in the river, in the eyes of Pharaoh, and in the eyes of his servants. And all the waters that were in the river were turned to blood. Verse 21, and the fish that were in the river died, and the river stank, and the Mitzrites were unable to drink the water of the river, and the blood was in all the land of Mitsrayim. So this was a great wonder, a great miracle, where all the waters of the land of Mitsrayim were turned into blood. You would have thought that that would have convinced Pharaoh that he should obey the voice of Yah and let the people go. Well, look at verse 22. And the magicians of Mitsrayim did the same with their magic. So they were able to do the same. And the heart of Pharaoh was strengthened, and he did not listen to them as Yah had said. So his magicians, those who were practicing these dark arts, so to speak, they were able to do the same miracle, the same wonder. And so Pharaoh said, I don't need to believe you. My magicians, my sorcerers, they can do the same thing. They're just as powerful as you are. Verse 23, and Pharaoh turned and went into his house, and his heart was not moved by this either. And all the Mitzrites dug all around the river for water to drink, and they were unable to drink the water of the river. And 7 days were completed after Yah had struck the river. So they couldn't drink the water that was in the river because it turned into blood. So they were digging, trying to find water in the ground so that they can drink. And 7 days went by after the river and all the waters had been turned to blood. And then we go on to Exodus chapter 8. We pick up with verse 1, and we see that the magicians of Mitsrayim also perform the third wonder, bringing up frogs out of the river to cover all the land. Let's read about it. And Yah spoke to Moshe, go to Pharaoh and say to him, thus said Yah, let my people go so that they serve me. But if you refuse to let them go, see, I am smiting all your border with frogs. There's going to be frogs in all the land. And the river shall swarm with frogs, which shall go up and shall come into your house and into your bedroom and on your bed and into the houses of your servants and on your people and into your ovens. I mean, they're everywhere. And into your kneading bowls. And the frogs shall come up on you and on your people and on all your servants. There's frogs everywhere, in your house, in your oven, in your kneading bowl. They're on you, they're on your servants, they're everywhere. And Yah said to Moshe, say to Aharon, stretch out your hand with your rod, there's that rod again, over the streams, over the rivers, and over the ponds, and cause frogs to come up on the land of Mitsrayim. So Aharon stretched out his hand over the waters of Mitsrayim, of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the land of Mitsrayin, another awesome wonder to bring up all those frogs out of the river to cover the land. You would have thought Pharaoh would have believed at that point. Look at verse 7. And the magicians did so with their magic. Again, they're walking step by step with Moshe and Aharon. They're doing the same things. They also brought frogs up out of the river to cover the land. It says, and the magicians did so with their magic and brought up frogs on the land of Mitsrayin. Pharaoh then called for Moshe and Aharon and said, pray to Yah to take away the frogs from me and from my people, and I shall let the people go to slaughter to Yah. And Moshe said to Pharaoh, explain yourself to me. When am I to pray for you and for your servants and for your people to destroy the frogs from you and your houses and remain only in the river? When do you want me to pray? When do you want these frogs to go away? So he said, tomorrow. I don't think I'll ever understand why he didn't say right now. He said tomorrow. In other words, we'll just spend one more night with all these frogs. And he said, let it be according to your word, so that you know that there is no one like Yah our Elohim. And the frogs shall turn aside from you and from your houses and from your servants and from your people. They shall remain in the river only. And Moshe and Aharon went out from Pharaoh. And Moshe cried out to Yah concerning the frogs which he had brought against Pharaoh. And Yah did according to the word of Moshe, and the frogs died out of the houses, out of the courtyards, and out of the fields, and they gathered them together in heaps, can you imagine? And the land stank because of all the dead frogs. And when Pharaoh saw that there was relief, when the frogs were gone, he hardened his heart and did not listen to them as Yah had said. But the point I wanted to make here was, the magicians hadn't missed a beat. They were doing the same wonders as Moshe and Aharon. So there is a force of power in the dark world. And we're going to see, when we turn to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, beginning with verse 9, that the lawless one, the anti-Messiah, and the false prophet are empowered by Hasatan to perform signs and wonders of falsehood. In the same way that the magicians had a special force of power, they were doing lying wonders, so the lawless one, the anti-Messiah, and his false prophet are empowered by Hasatan during the tribulation period to perform signs and wonders of falsehood. We need to understand that. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, beginning with verse 9. The coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan. He's going to be empowered by Satan. Speaking of the anti-Messiah, the lawless one, with all power, with all dark power, and signs and wonders of falsehood. There's going to be great signs and wonders of falsehood. In other words, lying signs and wonders. So if the magicians, if they can cast down their rods and they turn into serpents, and they can cause the water in the river, the water in the ponds, the streams to turn into blood, if they can bring up frogs out of the river to cover the land, we need to understand that there is a power of darkness that is great. I don't want to give you the impression that the devil is almighty. He may be mighty in some regards, but he's not almighty. We're going to see that here in just a moment. But we need to understand that unless we have a love of the truth, then we can be deceived. We're going to see that in the scripture here in just a moment. The lawless one comes with all power and signs and wonders of falsehood because he gets his power from Hasatan. Verse 10, and with all deceit of unrighteousness in those perishing because they did not receive the love of the truth in order for them to be saved. In other words, with all deception leading people to unrighteousness. They're going to be deceived to unrighteousness, to perform unrighteous acts. Why? Because they didn't love the truth. You have to love the truth. If you don't love the truth, you will be deceived. They didn't love the truth in order for them to be saved. If you don't love the truth in order to be saved, notice what happens. Look at verse 11. For this reason, because they didn't love the truth. For this reason, Elohim sends them a working of delusion. In other words, he gives them over to their unrighteousness. For this reason, Elohim sends them a working of delusion for them to believe the falsehood. They're walking in falsehood. They're embracing the falsehood. They don't love the truth. And it's Elohim who sends them a working of delusion so that they believe the falsehood. He gives them over. He turns them over to the falsehood, to the lies, in order that all should be judged who did not believe the truth, but have delighted in the unrighteousness. See, Pharaoh, when he saw his magicians do the same wonders as Moshe and Aharon, his heart continued to be hard. And he delighted in the unrighteousness. He didn't have a love of the truth. He wasn't seeking the truth. And he was given a delusion in his own mind. His heart was hardened. He was turned over to the lies that he embraced. And that's what we see will happen in the tribulation period. When the lawless one comes with all power and signs and wonders, and with all deceit of unrighteousness in those perishing. Why? Because they did not receive the love of the truth in order for them to be saved. Yeshua taught along these same lines in Matthew chapter 24. We'll start with verse 11. Yeshua said, "And many false prophets shall rise up and lead many astray." So in the days preceding the tribulation period, there will be many false prophets that will rise up and lead many astray. And because of the increase in lawlessness, the love of many shall become cold. Yeshua said, if you love me, keep my commandments. The Torah says love is spelled obedience. To love Elohim means you obey him. And so there's going to be an increase in disobedience. And because there's an increase in lawlessness, the love of many, love for Elohim, shall become cold. But he who shall have endured to the end shall be saved. All right, so you need to endure all the way to the end to be saved. Salvation is a progression. You need to get to the end to be saved. And this good news of the reign shall be proclaimed in all the world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end shall come. So when you see the abomination that lays waste, this is the image that lays waste or defiles, the image of the anti-Messiah set up in the most set apart place, in the rebuilt temple in Jerusalem. Yeshua says, when you see that image, the image of the anti-Messiah, notice what you're to do. So when you see the abomination that lays waste, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, set up in the set apart place in the temple, he who reads, let him understand. Then let those who are in Yehudah flee to the mountains. That's your sign. When you see the image of the anti-Messiah set up in the rebuilt temple in Jerusalem, then you are to flee to the mountains. If you are in Yehudah, you are to flee to the mountains. Let him who is on the housetop not come down to take whatever out of his house. And let him who is in the field not turn back to get his garments. And woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing children in those days. And pray that your flight does not take place in winter or on the Sabbath. Yeshua expects his followers to still be keeping the Sabbath during that time. This is a time in the future, the tribulation period, just before Yeshua's return. His followers should be keeping the Sabbath. For then there shall be great distress, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor shall ever be. This time of great distress is in the future. And if those days were not shortened, 3.5 years is what it's going to end up being, no flesh would be saved. But for the sake of the chosen ones, those days shall be shortened. If anyone then says to you, look, here is the Messiah, or there, do not believe. For false messiahs and false prophets shall arise. They'll culminate in the anti-Messiah and the false prophet. But false messiahs and false prophets shall arise, and they shall show great signs and wonders, like the magicians of Mitsrayin, so as to lead astray, if possible, even the chosen ones. These are going to be awesome, tremendous signs of darkness and deception. And if you don't love the truth, if you don't have a solid understanding of the Torah and Scripture, if you're not filled with the set-apart spirit of Yah, then you're most likely going to be deceived. These are very, very important matters. It's time to stop playing religion and to get serious about the days to come. Notice in verse 25, it says, see, I have forewarned you. So Yeshua has forewarned us. Now, let's go back over to the Torah, Exodus chapter 8. We'll pick up with verse 16. And this is going to tell us that the magicians of Mitsrayin could not perform any further wonders. So they threw their rods down, they became serpents. Although the rod that was in Aharon's hand became a serpent and swallowed up all their rods, all their serpents. So that will tell you something. And then they were able to turn the water into blood. And then they were able to bring up frogs. But they have a limit to their power. They were unable to do any further wonders. Let's take a look. Exodus chapter 8, verse 16. And Yah said to Moshe, say to Aharon, stretch out your rod and strike the dust of the land, so that it becomes gnats in all the land of Mitsrayin. So he was to strike the dirt. And when he struck the dirt, the dust became gnats in all the land of Mitsrayin. And they did so. And Aharon stretched out his hand with his rod and struck the dust of the earth, and it became gnats on man and beast. All the dust of the land became gnats in all the land of Mitsrayin. Again, an awesome wonder. Verse 18. And the magicians did similarly with their magic to bring forth gnats, but they were unable. So they came to the end of their ability. And there were gnats on man and beast. The magicians then said to Pharaoh, this is the finger of Elohim. But the heart of Pharaoh was strengthened, and he did not listen to them, as Yah had said. And so we see here that the magicians could no longer continue in this competition, in this battle between the forces of darkness and the forces of light. And they said, we can't do this. What they have done is the finger of Elohim. But again, Pharaoh was in a delusion, and his heart was strengthened, and he did not listen to them, as Yah had said. And then we're going to go on, and we're going to look at the time of the tribulation that Yah is going to protect his people. We see the same thing happening in the Torah. Look at Exodus chapter 8. We'll pick up with verse 20. It says, and Yah said to Moshe, rise early in the morning and stand before Pharaoh as he comes out to the water, and say to him, thus said Yah, let my people go, reoccurring theme, so that they serve me. Or else if you do not let my people go, see, I am sending swarms of flies on you and your servants, and on your people, and into your houses. And the houses of the Mitsrites shall be filled with swarms of flies, and also the ground on which they stand. And in that day I shall separate the land of Goshen, in which my people dwell, that no swarms of flies shall be there, so that you know that I am Yah in the midst of the land. He's going to place a difference. He's going to separate the land of Goshen, where his people are, with all the rest of Mitsrayin, of Egypt. And there's not going to be any swarms of flies where the Hebrews are, where the children of Israel are. Keep that in mind, because that same dynamic is going to happen during the tribulation period. Verse 23, and I shall put a ransom or a wall of division between my people and your people. Tomorrow this sign shall be. And Yah did so, and thick swarms of flies came into the house of Pharaoh. I mean, right there into Pharaoh's house. Thick swarms of flies, and into his servants' houses, and into all the land of Mitsrayin. And the land was ruined because of the swarms of flies. Now let's take this a little bit further, and I want to read a few other passages that tells us that Yah placed a difference, a wall of separation, his hedge of protection, you might say, between his people and the people of Mitsrayin. Exodus chapter 9 verse 1. And Yah said to Moshe, go in to Pharaoh and speak to him. Thus said Yah Elohim of the Hebrews, let my people go so that they serve me. For if you refuse to let them go and are still holding them, see, the hand of Yah is on your livestock in the field, on the horses, on the donkeys, on the camels, on the cattle, and on the sheep, a very grievous pestilence. And Yah shall separate between the livestock of Israel and the livestock of Mitsrayin, and let no matter die of all that belongs to the children of Israel. So they're in the midst of the trouble, but they're being protected from the trouble. Verse 5, and Yah set an appointed time, saying, tomorrow Yah is going to do this word in the land. And Yah did this word on the next day, and all the livestock of Mitsrayin died, but of the livestock of the children of Israel, not one died. There's that hand of protection, that wall of division. Verse 7, then Pharaoh sent, and see, not even one of the livestock of Israel was dead, not one. But the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, and he did not let the people go. And then go with me over to Exodus chapter 9, verse 8. We'll see another example. And Yah said to Moshe and Aharon, fill your hands with ashes from a furnace, and let Moshe scatter it toward the heavens before the eyes of Pharaoh. And it shall become fine dust in all the land of Mitsrayim, and it shall cause boils to break out in sores on man and beast in all the land of Mitsrayim. So they took ashes from the furnace and stood before Pharaoh, and Moshe scattered them toward the heavens. And they caused boils breaking out in sores on man and beast. And the magicians were unable to stand before Moshe because of the boils, for the boils were on the magicians and on all the Mitzrites. So now the magicians are not even able to stand before Moshe and Aharon. They have been inflicted with all these boils. Look at verse 12. But Yah strengthened the heart of Pharaoh. He still wouldn't believe. And he did not listen to them, as Yah had said to Moshe. So in essence, the magicians were defeated. They were defeated. They were affected by these boils. And they couldn't do any more. Their power was useless. And they were defeated. And then we see in Exodus chapter 9, verse 13, and Yah said to Moshe, rise early in the morning and stand before Pharaoh and say to him, thus said Yah Elohim of the Hebrews, let my people go so that they serve me. For at this time I am sending all my plagues unto your heart and on your servants and on your people, so that you know that there is no one like me in all the earth. I'm going to put these plagues on you so that you will know that there's none like me. Verse 15, now if I had stretched out my hand and struck you and your people with pestilence, then you would have been cut off from the earth. And for this reason, I have raised you up in order to show you my power. I want you to know my power. And in order to declare my name in all the earth. Now, they're going to be talking about this for a long, long time. You still exalt yourself against my people in that you do not let them go. See, tomorrow about this time, I am causing very heavy hail to rain down, such as has not been in Mitsrayin, from the day of its founding until now. And now send, bring your livestock to safety, and all that you have in the field. You better listen. I'm telling you what to do. They're not going to listen. Some of them will. For the hail shall come down on every man and every beast which is found in the field and is not brought home, and they shall die. Those among the servants of Pharaoh who feared the word of Yah. So now some people are hearing and some people are fearing. We know that when Moshe led the children of Israel out of Mitsrayin, they came out as a mixed company. They weren't all Hebrews. Some of the believing Mitsrites, the believing Egyptians, came out with them. It says, those among the servants of Pharaoh who feared the word of Yah made their servants and livestock flee to the houses. But those who did not set their heart on the word of Yah left their servants and livestock in the field. So we see those who are believers and those who are unbelievers. Then Yah said to Moshe, stretch out your hand toward the heavens, and let there be hail in all the land of Mitsrayim, on man and on beast, and on every plant of the field throughout the land of Mitsrayim. Then Moshe stretched out his rod toward the heavens, and Yah sent thunder and hail, and fire came down to the earth. And Yah rained hail on the land of Mitsrayim. Thus there came to be hail and fire flashing continually in the midst of the hail, very heavy, such as had not been in all the land of Mitsrayim since it became a nation. And the hail struck in all the land of Mitsrayim, all that was in the field, both man and beast. And the hail struck every plant of the field and broke every tree of the field. Only in the land of Goshen, where the children of Israel were, there was no hail. Pharaoh then sent and called for Moshe and Aharon and said to them, I have sinned this time. Yah is righteous, and my people and I are wrong. Pray to Yah, for there has been enough of the thunder and the hail of Elohim, and I am letting you go so that you stay no longer. And Moshe said to him, as soon as I go out of the city, let me spread out my hands to Yah. Let the thunder cease and the hail be no more, so that you know that the earth belongs to Yah. But as for you and your servants, I know that you do not yet fear before Yah Elohim. Then verse 33, and Moshe went out from the city, from Pharaoh, and spread out his hands to Yah, and the thunder and the hail ceased, and the rain was not poured out on the earth. Verse 34, and Pharaoh saw that the rain and the hail and the thunder had ceased, yet he sinned again and hardened his heart, he and his servants. And the heart of Pharaoh was strengthened, but he did not let the children of Israel go, as Yah had said through Moshe. All right. Well, let's go over to 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse 1, and let's see how these things that we just read apply to the tribulation period. It says, "Now, brothers, as to the times and the seasons, you do not need to be written to, for you yourselves know very well that the day of Yah comes as a thief in the night. For when they say," not when you say, but when they say, "peace and safety," then suddenly destruction comes upon them, as labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they shall not escape. But you, brothers, are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief. For you are all sons of light and sons of the day. In other words, you have revelation. We are not of the night nor of darkness. So then, we should not sleep as others do, but we should watch and be sober. For those who sleep, sleep at night. Those who get drunk are drunk at night. But we who are of the day should be sober, putting on the breastplate of belief and love, and as a helmet, the expectation of deliverance." There it is right there. We're not going to be taken out to avoid the tribulation period. There's no pre-tribulation rapture. We're going to go through the tribulation period, but we have an expectation of deliverance. In the same manner that the plagues, the wrath of Elohim, came upon the Mitsrites, but not upon the children of Israel, so we have an expectation that we will be delivered, that we will be protected, that we will be kept safe to the esteem of our Elohim. Verse 9, "Because Elohim did not appoint us to wrath." He did not appoint us to his wrath. He's not going to pour out his wrath upon us. Now, we will have to square off with the devil. We will have to face the wrath of Hasatan, but not Elohim's wrath, because Elohim did not appoint us to wrath, but to obtain deliverance, to be delivered, to be kept safe through our Master Yeshua Messiah. Now, go with me over to Revelation chapter 8. We'll pick up with verse 6. It says, "And the 7 messengers who held the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. And the first messenger sounded, and there came to be hail and fire mixed with blood, and they were thrown to the earth." This is a plague coming upon the wickedness of the people of the earth. Not believers, not sons and daughters of Elohim, not followers of Yeshua, but the wicked people of the earth. "And a third of the trees were burned up, and all green grass was burned up. And the second messenger sounded, and what looked like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood, and a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed." Yes, these things are going on around the people of Elohim, but the people of Elohim have an expectation of deliverance. Verse 10, "And the third messenger sounded, and a great star fell from the heaven, burning like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and on the fountains of water. And the name of the star is called wormwood. And a third of the waters became wormwood, and many men died from the waters because they were made bitter. And the fourth messenger sounded, and a third of the sun was struck, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them were darkened, and a third of the day did not shine, and likewise the night. And I looked, and I heard an eagle flying in mid-heaven, crying with a loud voice, 'Woe, woe, woe to those dwelling upon the earth, because the remaining blasts of the trumpet of the 3 messengers who are about to sound.'" And then look at Revelation chapter 9, beginning with verse 1. "And the 5th messenger sounded, and I saw a star from the heaven which had fallen to the earth, and the key to the pit of the deep was given to him. And he opened the pit of the deep, and smoke went up out of the pit like the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun was darkened, also the air, because of the smoke of the pit. And out of the smoke locusts came upon the earth, and authority was given to them, as the scorpions of the earth possess authority. And it was said to them that they shall not harm the grass of the earth, or any green matter, or any tree, but only those men who do not have the seal of Elohim upon their foreheads. So these plagues are coming upon people who have not been sealed with the seal of Elohim. In other words, they're not Elohim's children. They're not sons of righteousness. Verse 5, and it was given to them that they should not kill them, but to torture them for 5 months. And their torture was like the torture of a scorpion when it stings a man. And in those days men shall seek death and shall not find it, and they shall long to die, but death shall flee from them. We're talking about the wrath of Elohim coming against those who are disobedient, those who love unrighteousness, not upon his own children. And then we look at Revelation chapter 9, beginning with verse 20. It says, and the rest of mankind who were not killed by these plagues did not repent of the works of their hands, that they should not worship the demons. They were worshiping demons. And idols of gold. They were worshiping idols. And of silver, and of brass, and of stone, and of wood, which are neither able to see, nor to hear, nor to walk. Now, does this sound like the children of Elohim? Of course not. These plagues and this wrath was being poured out upon those who worshiped demons and those who worshiped idols. Verse 21, and they did not repent of their murders, nor of their drug sorceries, nor of their whoring, nor of their thefts. And then look at Revelation chapter 14. We'll pick up with verse 9. It says, and a third messenger followed them, saying with a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast, that's the anti-Messiah, and his image, and receives his mark upon his forehead or upon his hand, he also shall drink of the wine of the wrath of Elohim, which is poured out undiluted into the cup of his wrath. Again, it's the wicked, the perverted, the unrighteous, the disobedience who are receiving the wrath of Elohim, not his own children. And he shall be tortured with fire and sulfur before the set-apart messengers and before the Lamb. And the smoke of their torture goes up forever and ever. And they have no rest day or night, those worshiping the beast and his image. Also, if anyone receives the mark of his name, here is the endurance of the set-apart ones. We need to pay attention to this, verse 12. It says, here is the endurance of the patience of the set-apart ones. Here are those guarding the commands of Elohim and the belief of Yeshua. So we see the scripture contrasting the two groups, those who are perverted, those who are sinful, those who won't repent, those who are disobedient, those who do not love the truth, those who worship demons, those who worship idols, those who murder and the like. And then we see the other group, those who are guarding the commands of Elohim and the belief of Yeshua. In other words, those who are obeying the commands of Elohim, those who are obeying the 10 words, those who are obeying the Torah, those who are obeying the commands of Elohim and believe in Yeshua. And the people who are obeying the commands of Elohim and believing in Yeshua are right here in the scripture. We see them on the earth during the tribulation period. Then Revelation chapter 16, verse 21 says, and great hail from the heaven fell upon men, every hailstone about the weight of a talent, and men blasphemed Elohim for the plague of the hail, because that plague was exceedingly great. And so those who are blaspheming Elohim are not his children. Now, we need to realize that believers will experience the wrath of the devil, although we will not experience the wrath of Elohim, we will experience the wrath of the devil. In the same way that Pharaoh made Israel serve with hard labor and harshness, the devil will also wage warfare against the true believers. Go with me over to Revelation chapter 12, and we'll pick up with verse 1. It says, "And a great sign was seen in the heaven, a woman clad with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars." This is talking about believing Israel. "And being pregnant, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. And another sign was seen in the heaven, and see a great fiery red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on his heads. And his tail draws a third of the stars of the heaven and throws them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she bore a male child who was to shepherd all nations with a rod of iron," speaking of Yeshua. "And her child was caught away to Elohim and to his throne." So he ascended to the right hand of the Father. "And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by Elohim to be nourished there 1,260 days. That's 3.5 years. And there came to be fighting in the heaven. Michael and his messengers fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his messengers fought, but they were not strong enough, nor was a place found for them in the heaven any longer." See, the devil and his demons, the messengers of Hasatan, were not strong enough to overcome the messengers of Elohim. You remember the rod that Aharon threw down, swallowed up all of the serpents of the magicians of Mitsrayin? It says in verse 8, "But they were not strong enough, nor was a place found for them in the heaven any longer. And the great dragon was thrown out, that serpent of old called the devil and Satan, who leads all the world astray. He was thrown to the earth, and his messengers were thrown out with him. And I heard a loud voice saying in the heaven, Now have come the deliverance and the power and the reign of our Elohim and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our brothers, who accused them before our Elohim day and night, has been thrown down. And they overcame him," the believers who were on the earth, overcame him, Hasatan, because of the blood of the Lamb and because of the word of their witness. The word that was in their witness. They overcame Hasatan by the blood of the Lamb, by what Yeshua did for all of us on the tree, and by the word of our witness. And they did not love their lives to the death. Because of this rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. Woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has come down to you, having great wrath, knowing that he has little time. And when the dragon saw that he had been thrown to the earth, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. This woman is believing Israel. And the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle to fly into the wilderness to her place where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time. That's 3.5 years. From the presence of the serpent. And out of his mouth the serpent spewed water like a river after the woman, to cause her to be swept away by the river. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the river which the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. And the dragon was enraged with the woman, and he went to fight with the remnant of her seed. Notice, those guarding the commands of Elohim and possessing the witness of Yeshua Messiah. So the devil was enraged with believing Israel, and he went to fight with the remnant of her seed. It says those guarding the commands of Elohim, that's talking about the Torah commands, and possessing the witness of Yeshua Messiah. So believers during the tribulation period are those who are obeying the commandments of Elohim and possessing the witness of Yeshua, Messiah. And then go with me over to Revelation chapter 13. We'll pick up with verse 1. We're talking about the warfare that will take place during the tribulation period between Hasatan and the anti-Messiah and the false prophet and those who are sons and daughters of the Most High El, those who believe in Yeshua. It says in verse 1, "And I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads names of blasphemy." This is talking about the anti-Messiah. "And the beast I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as having been slain to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the earth marveled after the beast, and they worshiped the dragon who gave authority to the beast." Notice the people are worshiping the dragon, Hasatan, who gave authority to the beast, the anti-Messiah. And they worship the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast? Who is able to fight with him?" And he was given a mouth speaking great matters and blasphemies, and he was given authority to do so 42 months. That's 3.5 years. "And he opened his mouth in blasphemies against Elohim to blaspheme his name and his tent and those dwelling in the heaven. And it was given to him to fight with the set-apart ones and to overcome them. And authority was given to him over every tribe and tongue and nation, and all those dwelling on the earth whose names have not been written in the book of life of the slain Lamb from the foundation of the world shall worship him." And so he was given authority to overcome the set-apart ones, and there will be those who will show great esteem to Yah by the way that they sacrifice their lives, as they walk in righteousness, as they refuse to worship the beast or take his mark. And so that will happen. It also says that the anti-Messiah will have authority over every tribe and nation, and all those dwelling on the earth whose names have not been written in the book of life of the slain Lamb from the foundation of the world shall worship him. So those people who don't have their name written in the Lamb's book of life will worship the beast, the anti-Messiah. "If anyone has an ear, let him hear. He who brings into captivity shall go into captivity. He who kills with the sword has to be killed with the sword. Here is the endurance, or the patience, and the belief of the set-apart ones. And I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he does great signs, so that he even makes fire come down from the heaven on the earth before men." This is talking about the false prophet. "And he leads astray those dwelling on the earth because of those signs which he was given to do before the beast, saying to those dwelling on the earth to make an image to the beast who was wounded by the sword, yet lived. And there was given to him to give spirit to the image of the beast." This is the abomination that lays waste, the image that brings a defilement, that is set up in the most set-apart place in the rebuilt temple in Jerusalem. "And there was given to the false prophet to give spirit to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause to be killed as many as would not worship the image of the beast. And he causes all, both small and great, and rich and poor, and free and slave, to be given a mark upon their right hand or upon their foreheads, and that no one should be able to buy or sell except he has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. So we're talking about this warfare that's going to take place. We are going to be engaged in a battle with Hasatan, with the anti-Messiah, and with his false prophet. But just as Elohim raised up his two witnesses, Moshe and Aharon, he will again raise up two witnesses in the tribulation period. We mentioned that earlier in this message. Let's look at Revelation chapter 11, beginning with verse 3. And I shall give unto my two witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clad in sackcloth. That's 3.5 years. These are the two olive trees and the two lampstands that are standing before the Elohim of the earth. And if anyone wishes to harm them, fire comes out of their mouth and consumes their enemies. And if anyone wishes to harm them, he has to be killed in that way. These possess authority to shut the heaven so that no rain falls in the days of their prophecy. That's like Eliyahu. And they possess authority over waters to turn them to blood, and to smite all the earth with all plagues as often as they wish, just like Moshe and Aharon. And when they have ended their witness, the beast coming up out of the pit of the deep shall fight against them and overcome them and kill them. And their dead bodies lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Mitsrayin. We're talking about Jerusalem, where also our master was impaled. And some of the peoples and tribes and tongues and nations see their dead bodies for 3.5 days, and not allow their dead bodies to be placed into tombs. And those dwelling on the earth rejoice over them and exult, and they shall send gifts to each other, because these two prophets tortured those dwelling on the earth. They didn't want to hear it. They didn't believe it. They didn't have a love of the truth. And now that it appears that they're dead and gone, they're celebrating and sending gifts to one another. And after the 3.5 days, a spirit of life from Elohim entered into them, and they stood upon their feet, and great fear fell on those who saw them. And they heard a loud voice from the heavens saying to them, "Come up here." And they went up into the heaven in a cloud, and their enemies saw them. And in that hour there came to be a great earthquake, and 1/10 of the city fell. And in the earthquake 7,000 men were killed, and the rest became afraid and gave esteem to the Elohim of the heaven. All right, so we just read about the two witnesses. And just as Moshe and Aharon ultimately overcame Pharaoh in their interaction with him, and Moshe led the children of Israel out of Egypt, the scripture tells us that the anti-Messiah and the false prophet are going to be cast into the lake of fire. Let's take a look at that. Revelation chapter 19, beginning with verse 11. And I saw the heaven opened, and there was a white horse, and he who sat on him was called trustworthy and true, and in righteousness he judges and fights. Speaking of Yeshua. And his eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns, having a name that had been written, which no one had perceived except himself. And having been dressed in a robe dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of Yah. And the armies in the heaven, dressed in fine linen, white and clean, followed him on white horses, and out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations. And he shall shepherd them with a rod of iron, and he treads the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of El Shaddai. And on his robe and on his thigh, or on his banner, he has a name written, Sovereign of Sovereigns and Master of Masters. And I saw one messenger standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying to all the birds that fly in mid-heaven, "Come and gather together for the supper of the great Elohim, to eat the flesh of sovereigns, and the flesh of commanders, and the flesh of strong ones, and the flesh of horses, and of those who sit on them, and the flesh of all people, free and slave, both small and great. And I saw the beast and the sovereigns of the earth and their armies gathered together to fight him who sat on the horse and his army. And the beast was seized, and with him the false prophet who worked signs in his presence, by which he led astray those who received the mark of the beast and those who worshiped his image. The two were thrown alive into the lake of fire burning with sulfur, and the rest were killed with the sword which came from the mouth of him who sat on the horse, and all the birds were filled with their flesh. And so we see the demise of the anti-Messiah and his false prophet, just like we saw the demise of the Mitsrayin magicians. And then we see ultimately that Hasatan, the devil, is also cast into the lake of fire. Let's read about that, Revelation chapter 20, verse 1. And I saw a messenger coming down from the heaven, having the key to the pit of the deep, and a great chain in his hand. And he seized the dragon, the serpent of old, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. And he threw him into the pit of the deep, and shut him up, and set a seal on him, so that he should lead the nations no more astray until the 1,000 years were ended. And after that, he has to be released for a little while. So I want to stop right there and just say we're talking about the millennial kingdom when Yeshua returns. Hasatan is going to be bound up and cast into a pit and rendered powerless for 1,000 years. And Yeshua, along with his bride, those who have believed upon him with a belief that produces obedience, will rule this earth for 1,000 years of shalom. That's the millennial reign. And then it says that Hasatan is going to be released at the end of the 1,000 years for just a brief moment. Let's read the rest of it here. And I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was given to them, and the lives of those who had been beheaded because of the witness they bore to Yeshua, and because of the word of Elohim, and who did not worship the beast nor his image, and did not receive his mark upon their foreheads or upon their hands. And they lived and reigned with Messiah for 1,000 years. So those who said no, those who resisted the anti-Messiah, those who would not worship him, those who would not take his mark, there will be those who are beheaded for that reason. And they're going to rule and reign with Messiah for 1,000 years. And the rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were ended. This is the first resurrection, and we want to be a part of the first resurrection. Blessed and set apart is the one having part in the first resurrection. The second death possesses no authority over these, but they shall be priests of Elohim and of Messiah, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. Hallelujah. And when the 1,000 years have ended, Satan shall be released from his prison, and he shall go out to lead the nations astray, which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together for battle, whose number is as the sand of the sea. And they came up over the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of the set-apart ones and the beloved city, Jerusalem. And fire came down from Elohim out of the heaven and consumed them. And the devil who led them astray was thrown into the lake of fire and sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet are. And they shall be tortured day and night forever and ever. And so we see from the Torah a wonderful picture of the days that are to come. We learn lessons from the interaction between Moshe and Aharon with the Mitsrayin magicians. We see that the Mitsrayin magicians did have power to do signs and wonders, but their power was limited, and ultimately Moshe and Aharon overcame them. We also see that Elohim has not appointed those of his children to his wrath. He's going to pour out his wrath on the earth, but he's going to keep his own children safe from his wrath. We will face the wrath of the evil one, but we can overcome him and will overcome him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony, and we will not love our lives even to death. And we realize that some of us will show great esteem to our Father in the manner in which we sacrifice our lives for his cause. But ultimately, the anti-Messiah and the false prophet will be seized and will be overcome and will be cast into the lake of fire. And then also, at the end of the millennial reign, when there's one more rebellion against Elohim, then Hasatan also will be cast into the lake of fire, where he and the false prophet and the anti-Messiah will be tortured forever and ever. And we give praise to our Elohim in the name of our Master and Mashiach Yeshua for all that he has done, that we can believe upon Yeshua and be called sons and daughters of the Most High El. And we will worship our Elohim and the Lamb throughout the endless ages of eternity, enjoying his presence forever and forever. Hallelujah.